So welcome to the October 28, 2020 meeting of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. This meeting is being held virtually via web conference. This meeting includes a public dial-in option that's available on the Charter Commission's website. I'd like to introduce Chanel Tyler, the Commission's Interim General Counsel. Chanel, would you please reference circumstances behind the virtual meeting?
I don't hear anything.
Relevant TCA section.
Good morning. Given the current COVID-19 pandemic and concerns for public safety and welfare, as well as the pandemic's impact on the Commission's budget, the Commission's meeting today is being conducted via electronic means. And this is provided by TCA 844-108 and Governor Lee's Executive Order 60. This meeting is being recorded and it will be available at the conclusion of the meeting on the Commission's website, and a public option for dial-in was provided as well on the website. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chanel. As a reminder, all votes of the Commission are conducted via taking a roll call. And let me again ask commissioners prior to speaking, please identify yourself also when you make a motion or when you vote. So Judy, let's begin, and would you take a roll of the commissioners?
I will. Commissioner Richards.
Here.
Commissioner Tucker. Is that a here?
Here. Sorry, I had to unmute. I was slow.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Sisnet.
Here.
Commissioner Patterson.
Here.
Commissioner Levine. Commissioner Levine.
I see him.
I see him too.
But we need him to
Commissioner Levine, are you present? Commissioner Levine. We'll come back. Commissioner Hanson.
Present.
Chairman Griscom.
Here.
Let me try this again. Commissioner Levine, can you acknowledge orally that you are present? Commissioner Levine.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, now. Thank you. Okay, we have 8 of 8 commissioners. We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Judy. Our first order of business, today's agenda includes the commission discussion and action on key policies, the fiscal year 2022 budget, and the operational setup of the agency, as well as a presentation from the Tennessee Department of Education on the ASD schools exit plan. All of you were sent the agenda in advance of our meeting. Does anyone have any comments to make regarding the agenda before we proceed? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Commissioner Richards made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Go ahead, there. Commissioner Sisnet.
This is Terrence Patterson.
Is that a second?
Did the second. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, Judy, please call the roll.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker.
Sorry, I'm slow. Aye.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Sisnet.
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine. Commissioner Levine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Chairman Griscom.
Aye.
8 of 8, the agenda is approved.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting held on August 26, 2020 have been provided. Does anyone have any edits to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the August 26th meeting?
This is Levine. I so move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This
This
is
is Eddie Smith. I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, Judy, would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Richards,
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Cisnet,
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson,
aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye. Can you hear me? Aye.
Yes. Commissioner
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Chairman Griscom.
Aye.
8 of 8, the minutes are approved.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda today is a report from the Rules and Policy Committee. Terrence, thank you for leading this committee. I understand that we have some final reading items for approval today.
Yes, we do. Thank you. And again, this is Commissioner Terrence Patterson. And thank you, Chair. We've been hard at work, and I'd like to thank Chanel and Tess for their continued work to ensure that the Commission's policies are ready as we take on our new responsibilities around the charter school appeals and also authorization. So I'd like to ask Tess to walk the Commission through our authorizer policies that are going to be presented on final reading today. Tess?
Thank you, Terrence. And Judy, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down in that document to the list of authorizer policies, what I'm going to do, these are presented to you all on final reading today, and I'm going to highlight as I walk through just at a high level what these policies are, any changes that have been made between first and final reading. So policy 2.4 is renewal appeals and renewal applications. So this policy, along with the renewal appeals rule that the Commission has previously passed, is going to govern the work of the Commission in both hearing charter school renewal appeals from districts, as well as handling any renewal applications of its own charter schools. Policy 2.500, which is charter school revocation, with the Commission as an authorizer. This is the revocation policy that the Commission will utilize in handling any potential revocations of authorized schools by the Commission. A change that was made between first and final reading is that we remove the word appeals from the title of this policy to eliminate any confusion with regard to the revocation policy that handles revocation appeals for decisions coming out of local districts, as opposed to the Commission handling its own revocations. Policy 4.2 is your core authorizing principles. This policy really sets out, as an authorizer, what are the core principles that we are going to be operating under. These are aligned to both national best practices as well as the state's quality authorizing standards, which all authorizers in accordance with statute have to adopt. So this is going to set out the principles around setting a high bar for approval and success of our schools, maximizing school autonomy, and then protecting student interests and public interests. Policy 4.3, charter agreements, governs the Commission's charter agreements with authorized charter schools and outlines what will be included in those charter agreements. Over the next few meetings, the Charter Commission is going to begin to see the charter agreements for both new schools that were recently approved by the state board, as well as the schools that are transferring from the state board that are currently in operation. Policy 4.4, oversight and evaluation. This policy is going to govern the basic oversight and monitoring that the Commission will undertake on an annual basis when it comes to our authorized schools. So looking at site visits, the annual performance framework, reporting calendar, really outlines everything that we as a Commission staff will be conducting when it comes to our authorized charter schools. Policy 4.5, charter school autonomy. This policy really sets out the Commission's philosophy when it comes to maintaining charter school autonomy, and really puts out the clear message that the commission will do everything in its power to maximize the autonomy, both in terms of when we are or are not going to be giving technical assistance to schools, and that it's clear that any suggestions that the commission staff or commissioners may make are merely suggestions as opposed to directing schools what to do. Charter policy 4.6 is a charter school intervention policy. So this is the policy that will guide staff and commission work when it comes to any sort of corrective action plan or any notices that have to be sent to charter schools with regard to contract violations, performance deficiencies, or other issues that we see through the oversight and monitoring process. I do want to point out that policy 4.6 is referenced in the charter agreement, so that it's clear that when we are, when we're talking about holding schools accountable to the charter agreement, that we are referencing policy 4.6 as it relates to how we will be holding those schools accountable. Policy 4.7 is the charter school performance framework. There have been no changes on this framework since first and final reading, but we have assigned it a numeric policy number such that we can make sure from a cataloging and maintenance perspective, we are keeping track of this document. So this policy has been assigned 4.7. I will also mention that this too is referenced and included in the charter agreement. So when you start beginning to see those charter agreements for approval, you will see that the charter school performance framework is an exhibit of the charter agreement. The final policy for you all today is policy 4.8. This is LEA as a sponsor. This is to govern the commission's work if there is the instance where a school district would want to sponsor a charter school. So this commission staff will regularly review these policies with the Rules and Policy Committee, both in terms of updates to state law, updates to quality standards, but just as we start working these policies, it will be important for us to continue to revisit them to make sure they are up to date and in line with commission best practice. And this concludes my overview, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time. And I'd also like to recognize Chanel to see if there's anything else that I missed that she would like to add.
Thanks, Tess. I think you did a great job with the overview. There's nothing that I would add at this time.
So Tess, thank you. Seeing that there are no questions or comments from commissioners, I think we're now ready for a vote on the authorizer policies. Let me ask Commissioner Patterson, as the chair of this committee, Terrence, are there any final comments you want before we get a motion to approve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one comment, and this is Terrence Patterson speaking. I do want us to acknowledge that these framework templates that we have were put together, I guess, in partnership with the National Association of Charter School Authorizers. And so when we talk about national best practices and ensuring that our framework is very strong out of the gate, I do want to note for the commissioners that we work with a nationally recognized organization to help us put these together.
But Commissioner, thank you for your comments. Do we have a motion to approve the authorizer policies on final reading?
Commissioner, Mr. Chair, this is Terrence Patterson. I make the motion.
Thank you, Terrence. Do I have a second?
This is Eddie Smith. I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other discussion?
Commissioner,
Seeing
this is
none-
Dave Hanson. I think Judy Smith has actually dropped off the state power flash, is what she said. So I would volunteer myself as a very poor stand-in to take the role and to kind of keep track of votes until she comes back on, if that's okay with you.
Yes, that is fine. So then I guess I will call the roll since she's dropped off. Commissioner Tucker,
Yes. Or aye.
Okay, that's fine. Commissioner Richards,
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Levine,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnett,
Aye.
and the chairman votes aye as well. We have 8 votes. The authorizer policies on final reading are approved. There is one additional item on the Rules and Policy Committee report, which is proposed changes to policy 1.200, commission meetings. Let me call Commissioner Patterson for comments, please.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Patterson. So the committee did have a robust conversation last week with respect to the proposed changes for policy 1.200 on commission meetings. So I would like Tess to walk through in detail these changes for presentation to the commission. Tess?
Thank you. So presented to the commission on first and final reading are 2 key changes to the commission meetings policy. The first is in section 1A around regular meetings. And this is to specify that when setting regular meetings that the commission will do that by October 15th of the preceding calendar year. Previously, the policy did not specify if it was fiscal or calendar year, so this is to provide further clarity. The second change, which had a robust discussion at the committee meeting last week, was around section 7A. And this is to allow for recognition of speakers, public comment at both regular and special called meetings of the commission. What the conversation at the committee level was that we recognize that the instances where the commission may be having to have a special called meeting would be likely around charter school appeals. Given that appeals would bring out, and what we've seen is that they do incur a lot more public comment than potentially a non-appeal meeting. The committee thought it was important that the commission, from a transparency perspective, allow for public comment both at regular and special called meetings. I would be happy to take any questions and also would open it up to any other members of the committee who would like to share their thoughts on these policies as well.
Thank you, Tess. We're going to be ready to vote on policy 1.200. Before we do, Commissioner Patterson, let me call on you for any comments that you would like to make before I ask for a motion.
This is Commissioner Patterson. I don't have anything further to add, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve policy 1.200?
This is Wendy. So moved.
Do we have a second?
This is Terrence Patterson, second.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I am back online. I apologize. The state internet went down, but I see that you guys have kept going, so I'm happy to hear that, and I'm ready to take the roll call for this policy.
Okay, hold with me 1 sec, Judy. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Judy, would you call the roll?
Absolutely. Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnett. Commissioner Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Chairman Griscom.
Aye.
8 of 8. The policy is approved.
So, Judy, I must put a note in here that as the chairman, I appreciate the background material I have. Number 2, I've been attentive as to how you've run this because I actually was able to call the roll. Not probably the way you do. I called it by a card that I have in front of me. So, yes, we made it, but I'm so glad you're back. Thank you. So, Terrence, let me thank you and the members of your committee on rules and policy for the excellent work that you did and for getting us moving this forward. So thank you very much. Now, our next agenda item is a report of the Business Operations Committee. First item we will review is the office space proposal for the Charter Commission. I'd like to ask Tess to walk the commission through this proposal.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be talking about this proposal with the commission today. I know it has been a work in progress and a lot of conversation, so really excited that we are here today. So the proposal that was in your packet is based on numerous conversations that both I and Judy Spencer have had with the folks in the state called the Stream offices who handle state real estate. We had a really good conversation at the Business Operations Committee multiple times about this proposal. So the proposal is to acquire 981 square feet of space on the 5th floor of the Davy Crockett building. The space is acquired at a rate of $22.50 per square foot. And this proposal would allow me as the executive director to acquire this space and then work with the Stream agency to acquire additional space as needed. That additional space acquisition would then be reported to the Business Operations Committee. It's important to understand that when considering this proposal that the landscape of state agency real estate has dramatically changed since we first started this conversation back in the spring. Given the COVID-19 pandemic, many state agencies are working to actually reduce their footprint. More agencies are working towards going to a more remote fashion permanently. And the state in general is kind of re-looking at how much real estate it holds and considering consolidation over the next 2 to 3 years. The benefit that that brings to the commission is that we are able to acquire space as we need it. And that was really what the Stream offices really encourage the commission to do, is that don't feel like we have to acquire space for all 10 employees immediately. There is no other agency that is currently looking at space on the 5th floor of Davy Crockett. So therefore, we would get right of first refusal if anyone were to start thinking about coming into that space. And from a budgetary perspective, we're able to really grow the space as we grow the staff. So in the materials that were sent to you all ahead of time, there's a more detailed recommendation as well as a detailed floor plan that shows what space we are looking at. This is currently projected on the screen by Judy, and we would be looking at the space in the bottom right-hand corner. So it would be 2 offices, an administrative cube, and then a room that would be a copier / file room. Acquiring this space would give the commission access to the shared conference room spaces in the building, such that both staff and also in the future, we could be holding commission meetings in that space. The current only other tenant on the floor is the State Board of Education. They're occupying the left-hand corner with about 12 spaces of employees. The remainder of the floor is currently completely vacant. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions that commissioners have about this office space proposal.
So Tess, let me ask Commissioner Smith and Cisnet if they have any comments they would like to make about the office proposal.
This is Eddie Smith. Unless anyone has any questions, Tess summed up everything well. So we've talked about it a lot, and this is where we're at. And it's I believe this recommendation was unanimous between the 3 of us from the Business Operations Committee.
This is Commissioner Cisnet. I concur.
Thank you. With that, do I have a motion to approve the office space proposal for the Charter Commission?
This is Eddie Smith, and I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioners.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cisnet, I second.
Thank you, Derwin. Any other discussion? Judy, I see you're still here. Would you call the roll?
I will. Commissioner Richards,
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnet, Commissioner Patterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Levine,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Chairman Griscom.
Aye.
8 of 8, the proposal is approved.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 2022 Charter Commission budget. I'd like to ask Tess to walk the commission through the proposed budget. Tess?
Thank you. So presented to you all today is the proposed fiscal year 22 budget. This is a critical operational step for the agency because beginning in fiscal year 22, as you all know, we will have assumed all responsibilities as it relates to charter school appeals and the authorization functions from the State Board of Education. Moreover, this is the first year that the commission is going to begin collecting an authorizer fee from its authorized charter schools. And so therefore, it's important that the commission begin to conservatively project and include that revenue in its budget such that we can work with the Department of Finance and Administration over the next several fiscal years to get to a place where our revenue is stabilized, both in terms of state recurring dollars as well as the authorizer fee. So first, I'd like to talk about the projected revenue. And as Judy has projected on the screen right now, you will see that from a state funding perspective, the commission will be receiving $707,300 in state recurring dollars. The previously allocated $250,000, which was additional non-recurring state revenue, will cease to be allocated to the commission. So you will see that we have no budgeted revenue in that additional state funding. We are beginning to recognize, from a conservative perspective, $591,000 in an authorizer fee. So this is assuming that we will have 5 schools in operation in fiscal year 22 at a rate of 3% of the BEP per school would be collecting in an authorizer fee. In the packet of materials that I sent to the commission as a part of this meeting, you have a breakdown of authorizer fee by school. I would be happy to discuss this authorizer fee in greater detail as needed. The next revenue that you see projected here is that beginning in fiscal year 22, the Charter Commission is going to become the pass-through entity of its authorized charter schools as it relates to BEP funding and federal grant funding. This is merely a placeholder because we won't know actual revenues from both a BEP perspective or a federal grant perspective for fiscal year 22 until at the earliest March of 2021. And at that point, we will begin getting monthly estimates of what that projected revenue is. This will show up in our budget as a pass-through, so it's important that we recognize it. But from a state budgeting perspective, when I work with Department of Finance and Administration, they understand that this is merely being recognized as it's flowing through our budget, as opposed to we have expenditures aligned to it, other than the fact that we are then giving it to our schools. And with that, we are going to turn to the proposed expenditures. And once I walk through this, happy to take any more detailed questions as necessary. So first, the total expenditures in the salaries and benefits line for the 10 positions are projected to be $1,116,000 approximately. I do want to note here that as a part of the fiscal year 22 state budget request, I have asked that the commission move approximately $280,000 into the salary and benefits category. This is also known as above the line, to ensure that the Charter Commission can competitively hire the remainder of its positions that it's authorized to fill. This additional $280,000 is reflected in the budget that you are viewing today, and that was at the request of the Business Operations Committee. Once the state budget is passed by the General Assembly in late April, I will be coming back to the commission to revise the budget based on what the actual budget passed by the General Assembly is. If this ask is not completed, if we are not able to move this money above the line, then I would be coming back to you all to revise the budget such that we can ensure that we have an accurate budget for fiscal year 22. The remainder of the budgetary categories really mirror, I think, what we have been previously working under for fiscal year 21. So you'll see expenditures in the professional services category. So this would cover any third-party services such as our student information system, translation of policies and procedures, any back office contracted services, as well as any external reviewers who would be supporting in the charter school appeals functions. We have budgeted in commission meetings approximately $42,000. So this would cover both meeting setup costs as well as travel reimbursement for the 4 quarterly meetings. This would also assume that if for whatever reason we needed to have a special called meeting and if we had the budget available, we could do that in person, but we could also do that via a WebEx conference as well. We have allocated money for staff travel, which would cover our travel to schools, conferences, and other meetings. We have included facilities rent. This is at the maximum that would be for 10 positions and the space for 10 individuals at $55,000. We've included a line item around just computers, equipment, supplies, etc. That would support the overall operations of the commission staff and the commission. And then in an other category is about $10,000, which could cushion any unexpected costs that may arise. I did want to point out that the column on the right is a 12% reduction column. So the commission has been asked to go ahead and produce a budget that if all agencies are required to reduce both from an expenditure perspective and a revenue perspective, a 12% reduction, that we have that ready to go. So you will see that in the column on the right as it relates to the FY22 budget. So in terms of next steps, what is happening kind of behind the scenes is that the Department of Finance and Administration has asked for agencies to put in their budget requests. I have put in the request that will be voted on today as it relates to the $280,000 to move above the line. The governor's budget will be released in early 2021. And then at that point, the General Assembly will begin its legislative deliberation. So we very likely will be asked to present and testify in front of both chambers on the budget. And then once the appropriations bill is passed by the General Assembly, that I will be coming back to you all with a revised budget so that we know much more in greater detail what the actual revenues and actual expenditures will look like. From a planning perspective, I think we should anticipate that happening at our July 22 meeting, such that we are able to reflect actual BEP, actual authorizer fee, and actual grant revenue, as well as what we will be looking at in terms of expenditures. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I know that was a lot of information, so happy to go into additional detail as necessary.
This is Commissioner Richards. I have a question with respect to the $280,000 above the line. You're going to be hiring your staff over these next few months, and you aren't going to have an answer on that, I guess, until July. Are you prepared, to the extent you exceed whatever is the approved pay for a position as you go through your hires, to hold on hiring for other positions to stay in budget if that's necessary?
Yes, that's a great question. Actually, something that I have flagged for the Department of Finance and Administration. I think the reality, as you're exactly right, is that we are going to max out on our current approved above the line. I would say relatively quickly, and probably be left with potentially 2 positions that we are not able to fill based on the current approved budget. So I am going to be in conversations with finance and administration around what are the possible solutions to that. I think also, to your point, I think I am, as I'm building out the staff plan, am thinking about the positions that we could potentially hold on until July of 2021 to fill versus the positions that we would need to hire as soon as possible. I think that this is the reality of us being in a startup entity, is that we are trying to really figure out what we need and how to communicate that to the Department of Finance and Administration. And I will say I've had very positive conversations with them. They understand we are in a startup entity and want to be supportive in that. But that's absolutely the reality of the situation, is that at some point, based on the current approved salaries and benefits, that we would have to potentially hold on filling out all 10 positions. Or the alternative is that we decide that we're going to fill positions at a much reduced salary to hit that point. And I think that's potentially a road we're going to have to think about moving forward.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I do want to emphasize, I think it's very important as a startup to be within our budget constraints each year as we roll out our startup program. I think you set a tone and people understand that you are part of the responsible group in dealing with your expenditures. So I would just encourage you, if there is a problem here, bring it to the attention of the commission sooner rather than later, because I get a sense that we're all going to want to be in budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is Wendy. Could you talk through just what those 10 positions are?
Yes. So I have on my sheet what I'm thinking in terms of, hold on. I'm going to pull up my draft org chart, Wendy, while I'm talking to you, so I make sure that I'm not. Okay. And Judy, I don't know if you can you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, give me just a second. I'll stop sharing mine and make you the host.
Leave it to me to complicate things. Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. And as long as you all are realizing that you're about to see a very messy test head of a document, so.
Give me just a minute.
Okay.
You should have the host role. So you should be able to share.
Okay.
Ooh.
All right, can you all see that document?
Yes.
Okay. Again, apologies that it's my test head for a second. So as you can see, here's an initial sketch of how I'm thinking about the 10 positions. And I think there's still obviously a lot of flexibility in what those 10 positions could be. I think right now I'm actively hiring for the general counsel role, which, as I shared in the update, very close to making a decision there. I'm also looking to hire a director of strategy and policy and/or a special assistant of director in strategy and policy. This is really going to be a little bit of like my right-hand person to help with a lot of the strategic work, the planning of the agendas, the planning of the materials, really to be helping me in terms of what does performance management look like, what does our strategic plan look like, to really kind of be a right-hand person for me. We do have an executive administrative assistant, Mary Elam, who supports on a lot of the administrative functions. I'm also actively hiring for a director of external affairs. This is going to be our point person when it comes to legislative affairs and really outreach to the legislature, as well as our public information officer. The remainder of those 5 positions are really where we're going to have to figure out from a LEA responsibilities as well as authorizing responsibilities, how do we fulfill those functions? So I have developed the Director of Finance and Operations job description, which what I'm envisioning is that this role would oversee the team that's handling all of the LEA functions. I think it is very realistic for that team to be the Director of Finance and Operations, handling all of the BEP, the federal grants, et cetera, as well as to oversee the team that's doing federal programs, special populations, and data. I think the reality of the situation is these positions for the LEA team are must hire before the end of this fiscal year. We cannot begin July 2021 without these positions. I think the positions we can honestly potentially hold on, although I think they're incredibly important, are the authorizing positions. And the reason is that I think I certainly have a very strong background in authorizing and could support the authorizing work until we are able to get to a place where we have additional equity and can fill those positions, I think, at the range that we need to fill them. And I also think if we're being realistic about what we cannot start the year with, we cannot start the year without those LEA positions filled and operating, because we have to ensure that our schools start out very successfully. And it's many of those operations that are really going to be critical in that work. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about the 10 positions for right now. I know that you all, you didn't get this document ahead of time, so happy to answer any questions. And Wendy, I don't know if that description was helpful for you.
Yeah, this is incredibly helpful, and sort of 2 thoughts. One is, this makes me even happier that you are our executive director, because this shows, your thought process is way past where my already. And then the other point I want to make, just because of the work that I do in my day job, is seeing a position that involves special populations, I think, is really, really critical, especially as the portfolio grows. I know the state board has somebody who is handling special pops. They were at a session that I ran yesterday from NACS's conference. And I do think great authorizers have someone who is there specifically addressing needs. I'm happy to see that in one of your critical roles.
Other questions for Tess? Let me ask Commissioners Smith and Sisnett if they have any comments they would like to make on the budget before I ask for a motion to approve.
Commissioner Sisnett, I don't have any comments.
And this is Eddie Smith. I don't have any comments other than we probably need to get Tess a bigger screen, because her eyes are going to start hurting after looking at that small font.
Good point, Commissioner. All right, thank you. So do I have a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 Charter Commission budget?
Commissioner Sisnett, so moved.
In stereo. Derwin, go ahead.
Well,
I'll second. How about?
And Wendy are excited to approve this budget, so.
So Commissioner
It's been a long time coming.
made the motion and Commissioner Tucker made the second. Any other discussion? Judy, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnett.
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Chairman Griscom.
Aye.
8 of 8, the fiscal year 22 budget is approved.
Thank you. Our final item of Business Operations Committee report is the 2021 Charter Commission meeting dates. In 2021, our hope is to have in-person commission meetings in a safe and socially distanced way. Rotate the location of meetings between Nashville and other parts of the state, meaning 2 in Nashville, 1 potentially in Memphis, and 1 potentially in Chattanooga. I do know that as we reviewed this, there was at least 1 commissioner who had an issue with one of the dates. Getting at least 8, and at some point we'll have 9 people together for majority of this is not easy. So thank you for that as we started putting this together. And Tess, can you walk the commission through the proposed dates, please?
Yes, absolutely. So as the chair mentioned, we are planning for in-person meetings in 2021. We are going to be shifting to a 2-day meeting approach. So the first day of the meeting would be committee meetings, and the second day would be business, the commission's business meetings. The Q1 dates are February 4th and 5th. The proposed location is Nashville. Q2 is April 8th and 9th, with again, those being held in Nashville. And I think it's important for us to continue to think about Q1 and Q2 meetings being held in Nashville, as we know that's typically when the General Assembly is going to be in session. It's going to be important for us to be present with those members of the General Assembly as necessary. Q3 is proposed to be July 12th and 13th. And then Q4 would be October 11th and 12th, proposing that Q3 and Q4 meetings be held outside of Nashville. And with that, I am happy to take any questions or anything that we need to discuss with regard to the meetings.
So Tess, let me ask you to share, if you would, as we looked at these dates, it was with the notion of making sure we'd have meeting rooms available to do this. And then also when we looked at the 2-day type meeting is so that, again, as commissioners, since we're working together, it gives us a time at the end of that first day to actually have more informal type dinner, something like that, that allows us to just, sort of really work together and just share a lot of information, particularly in a social type environment. So Tess, let me just ask you if you want to add any more clarification.
No, thank you for that. I think what we are anticipating now is that we would hold the first day that committee meetings would begin somewhere around noon to allow people who then want to drive in, they're able to do that. If we're able to do school visits some point in the future, potentially we could talk about that, but I think the reality is that may not be happening for our February meeting, but certainly I think that's something that we want to encourage moving forward as we were able to. So committee meetings would happen in the afternoon between 12 to 4, that we would potentially eventually able to have dinner together as we can, and that the business meeting would occur between 9 and noon on the second day, such that people could leave and drive home as necessary on that second day. We did schedule meetings both for Thursdays and Fridays, as well as Mondays and Tuesdays. I think we want to provide some variety to those meetings based on people's calendars. But as we're looking into future year planning, we will certainly be taking people's feedback around days of the week that work best and how that we can make this as efficient as possible.
Thank you, Tess. Are there other questions about the meeting dates?
And Tess, while we're waiting for that, could you please move me back to host so that I can share materials and invite participants?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, may I ask for a motion to approve the meeting dates for 2021?
Eddie Smith, I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do I have a second?
This is Commissioner Cisnet. I second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other discussion? Judy, now if you're hosting again, would you call them?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to know, Yeah, I'm the commissioner with the conflict in October and understand the need to get the entire group together. I cannot move my conflict. I'm on a public board. They set their meetings 2 years in advance, and that's a mandatory attendance. I will do my best to review the materials in advance, make sure any comments or thoughts that I have are provided to the staff so they can at least be addressed, and then to follow up after the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Richards. And as you know from our rules, that as long as we're notified and there's that a commissioner who's not able to attend is appropriate. So thank you. I appreciate that and fully understand. So Judy, with that, would you like to call the roll, please?
Absolutely. Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnet? Commissioner Patterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Levine?
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Chairman Griscom?
Aye.
8 of 8, and the motion passes.
Thank you. And let me again thank Commissioner Smith and Sisnet for a lot of good work. I think we got a lot accomplished. It sets us in a great position as we're heading into actually becoming a fully functional charter commission. Tess, I would like to move up your presentation, if you don't mind, as executive director, so we can stay on schedule, please.
Chairman Griscom, if I might interrupt briefly, I have checked with Eve Carney and she is ready to present at 10 a.m. If we want to take a 5-minute break, we're going to have to figure out a couple technical difficulties. If that's all right, if we could take 5 minutes and then Eve Carney can present at 10 a.m.
That is even better. Thank you, Judy. So we will leave for 5 minutes. We'll reconvene at 10 o'clock Central Time. 11 o'clock for those of us who live in the eastern part of the state. And then we'll have Dr. Carney give us her presentation. So 5-minute delay, a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Hey, I cannot get host duties back and Eve's sitting waiting and I can't admit her. And if I don't have host duties, I can't share her presentation.
Hey, Judy, you're not muted. I don't know if you know that.
Good morning. This is Eve Carney. I'm just checking my audio.
We can hear you, Eve.
Thank you.
Okay, Judy, I know that Eve has joined us. We're about at the end of our 5-minute recess. So we will ask other commissioners to come back on and let us know that they have rejoined us, and then we will pick up the agenda.
Good morning. I'm trying to share my slides. It's not allowing me to upload those. I see that Tess is back. Perhaps she can load them.
Hey, Judy, I made you host again, so I think you can move it to Eve to present.
Or Judy, if you'll just navigate, that's awesome too. I appreciate that.
So Judy, let me know, is everybody back?
Yes, all of a sudden every picture came up. So we are all here. Eve, you should be able to present now.
So welcome back. Dr. Carney, I want you to know that we have continued moving forward as you came in and sort of gave us a lot of direction back earlier this year. So we have made progress. So I hope you will feel good and you look and see the things that we've been able to do. At our February 2020 meeting, Dr. Eve Carney with the Department of Education gave a presentation to us about the Achievement School District and how the department was developing a transition plan for ASD schools exiting back to local districts. I'm glad to welcome Dr. Carney back. It's good to see you again, Eve, and to discuss an updated proposal for the ASD schools exit plan, and then any feedback that the commissioners may have to share with you. The presentation was in the packet of materials that were sent out last week. So Eve, thank you. It is great to see you, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Griscom, and thanks to be able to share some information with you all. I mean, this has been a very, very busy time over these past several months in this body of work. And so I'm really looking forward to not only sharing with you, but then hearing some of your questions, but also inviting any feedback that you may have. I do think it's important to kind of frame this a little bit. There's lots of different layers to some of this work. And so just in terms of just foundationally, this plan really is intended to facilitate the exit of individual schools out of the ASD, whether that means that they are at their 10-year mark or they have exited priority status, hopefully, or exited for other reasons. And so really the work that this slide deck begins to share is about the development of an exit plan to facilitate that exit. It is important in the development of this to think about the current set of ASD schools, but to also develop something that makes sense 5 years from now, 7 years from now, 10 years from now. So making sure that it's the right framework for the current situation, but also one that would be appropriate going forward. The one thing that we also know from our group and from the feedback I have received from practically everyone is that this is really not a one-size-fits-all type of plan and should not be. We acknowledge and want to respect the fact that every school is unique. Every school has different challenges, strengths, partners, opportunities, and the plan should be consistent but nimble enough or malleable enough to meet those unique needs. That the way that this plan will function is sort of like a template. There's going to be, it's a guiding document that has kind of an appendix item with it that you will see as we walk through kind of and begin to kind of put together the components. We'll see how this actually is intended to steer a transition team to make those critical decisions. You will see as we walk through some places, you'll see things that are going to be universal across all transition plans, but also trying to lead it where there could be other components where there would be school-specific decisions made. Most of the key decisions will be made in collaborative discussions with stakeholder groups, and that means ASD leadership, district leadership, school leadership. There is not a world where this is a transition plan that we will be making all the decisions from Nashville regarding schools in communities in another part of our state. So I'm really excited to share some details with you, and let's just get going. As with all of our work, we always ground our work in the strategic plan. I don't know that there's a place more appropriate for that than Best for All in our priority schools, and specifically students and teachers serving the Achievement School District. All three of these strategic priorities are very applicable, and as we work through this transition plan, I think you'll begin to see the presence of these components across the plan. And so today what we'll do just in our time is at a high level talk through the legislation that is governing this transition plan. We'll talk through the advisory group, the role that they have played and will continue to play in the coming months. I will walk through a high level overview of the plan, talking through kind of the function of each of the sections. I'll spend some time talking about the emerging themes that we are hearing from the advisory group, from other stakeholder groups, as well as some initial recommendations, leaving certainly time at the end for question and answer. I do think that it's kind of it might be helpful to take those questions at the end, but if there is a pressing question or a clarifying question, I'm happy to take that throughout the presentation. So let's jump into the legislation. As you all are likely aware, the ASD, Achievement School District, has been in existence. It goes all the way back to 2011, and there was legislation on the books back in 2011 around the ASD, and even within that initial legislation, there was a reference to a transition plan. But in 2011, people's attention was not on exit criteria. It was on what should govern schools entering the ASD, what should supports look like when they're in the ASD. Well, we are now at the moment where we are and moving forward with developing that exit criteria. That kind of, so you have that body of legislation, but in the summer, this past summer in July, the General Assembly passed Senate Bill 1247, requiring a few things. It's a couple of paragraphs, but it's robust in its ask, and that is that the commissioner develop a transition plan that is to plan the return of schools from the ASD to their district. It also references and gives a time parameter of no earlier than the 24-25 school year, and that this plan is to be presented to the education committees of the House and Senate no later than January 1, 2021. So that was this past summer, and immediately in my discussions with the commissioner, one thing that we know is it's certainly best to take on these types of projects and deliverables with information from stakeholders. And so immediately we began to convene an advisory group to inform the development of this plan. And so when we were thinking about the advisory group, knowing that we have a number of districts serving priority schools currently, we wanted to ensure that we had lots of voices at the table as part of those discussions, and I'll walk through those in just a moment. But I did think it was important, and I actually included the language from the legislation here. The purpose is to inform the development of this transition plan for the purpose of planning the return. And so really that's been the role that they have played, and it's been very helpful to have this ongoing engagement from this group. I will say it has been a labor. It's been 2 hours of time and lots of robust discussions and deep dives with this 18-member group. This group represents, we have voices from the advocacy community. We have priority school district leadership from Hamilton County, Metro Nashville, Shelby County, the Achievement School District. We have elected officials, both at the state level, local level, school board level. We have some parents, we have principals, we have charter leaders in this group. We are fortunate to have Commissioner Patterson as a member of that group as well, and appreciate very much always his insight. It has been a good experience over the last 3 months, and we'll walk through now kind of where we are in the, I'm gonna move my thing there, where we've been so far and where we're going. As I said, that legislation passed in July. We immediately convened a group. We met, did that initial kind of first date meeting in August, and began to establish some strong direction for this group, and met again in September, just met recently in October. Looking forward to sharing this.
Hey, I can't hear you anymore.
Neither can I. I thought it was just me.
Eve, you've just kicked out, and we can't hear you.
I don't think she can hear us.
She's in the zone, so I feel bad that we can't hear her right now.
Okay, if you all be patient for a little bit, we're working on some technical difficulties. Eve, can you hear me? Nod.
Any chance you can hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so I switched audio. You all just missed, sorry about that. I'm not certain what you all heard last. I'm trying to make my screen show up again for me. Let's see.
Eve, you were at the point of having referenced the 3 meetings of the advocacy group and then the meeting with us today.
Wonderful. I'm trying to just get my screen. You all can still see the screen?
No. Let me see if I can share it.
That would be fantastic. If you can hear me, I can talk through that. So I'll just keep going while Judy pulls up the deck to try to keep this on track. I apologize. I don't know. Both Judy and I are in the office thinking, you know, that always works. And here we are, both of us kind of fighting the technology this morning. But the long and short of it is that we've had 3 strong meetings with these stakeholders who have been so generous with their time to share their feedback in different ways. We've done everything from solicit general information to share data, to also letting them review early drafts and give us reactions and feedback. The month of November will be busy. We have definitely, we'll be posting the draft on the website for 2 weeks in the middle of the month. Also having virtual town halls in impacted communities in November, taking all of that feedback, pulling it back together to meet with the advisory group at the beginning of December. That will then kick off other discussions with the Office of the Governor and the legislators who have been invested. We have 2 legislators on our committee. It's been a great partnership there, and we will push forward to meet that January 1st submission deadline in that way. So lots of good discussions and conversations, and as you all might imagine, lots of different opinions about how to attack this work. So now we will move to the plan overview.
Excuse me, Eve, can we get a confirmation? Can you all see the presentation now? Okay, great. Thank you.
Wonderful. And so just in terms of the plan overview, we really did some research around not only what was in our own legislation, what's in other governing legislation, but also looking at what some other states had done in this space, Louisiana, New Jersey, to try to think about ensuring that we develop a robust template that will really lead to the right decisions and discussions, keeping what's best for kids in the center of those conversations. As I noted at the outset, this is not a one-size-fits-all plan, and it's not intended to be. So I'm going to walk through the sections you see on your slide now. I'm going to walk through each of those individually, but I think it's really just a matter of like trying to marry the pieces that need to be standardized with the pieces that need to be school specific and school level informed. And so as you see, there are some introductory grounding pieces. Section 1 is that kind of general information that will remain constant across those. Section 2 around authorization, talking about the different options that each school may have based on lots of factors. Section 3 is kind of the meat of the development of those plans. Section 4 walks through those standard terms I've mentioned a couple of times. Section 5 acknowledges that not every plan will look identical. And then the 2 appendices, one is really more just a kind of a catalog of some of the statutory information that's relevant here. And then Appendix B would become that template that will ultimately become the transition plan as it's developed. So on the general information slide, this is where the ASD lives. It's very complex in that there's state statute. There's also the Every Student Succeeds Act. When we think about that annual meaningful differentiation of schools that's required in the federal law, there's also a school performance framework that is part of the memorandum of agreement between the district and the charter. And so there are multiple levels here that have to be considered when we think about how these pieces are governed, and the plan will be grounded in those kind of key components. Section 2 talks through, this is really the part where there's still some work, and we're still trying to make sure that as we detail options, we are beginning to think through all of the potential options that could be available for a school. And that's based on a number of factors. It could be based on how many years are left in their charter, their overall performance, a school's desire to remain open. We know that there are schools who are struggling financially, and it may not be viable for them to continue. You may have other options. So Section 2 really is a section that will have all of the options listed. And again, it's a very school specific set of options. And so at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that kind of current structure of governance, which is there's an application, and that application is either approved or denied by the home district. There is an appeal process to the district. There is an appellate part of that process that you all will be part of. Again, it's not just ASD legislation. There's charter legislation as well to consider in all of this. So this is the section that will lay out some of the kind of the options available based on that transference of governance of a school. Section 3 is really around the development of the plan. So Section 2 is kind of the list of here's the ways in which a school will exit. And once they're eligible to exit based on one of those options, that will become kind of the initiation of the development of a plan. And so that plan begins by establishing a transition team. And once we know that team has representation from the groups I referenced earlier, ASD leadership, school leaders, district leaders, community leaders who are invested in the students and the success of these schools transitioning. And so part of that is they will begin to establish a cadence and expectations. And the things you see here will be those first big steps that they will take. Clearly, that will be done in facilitation with the department as part of that. But making sure you have the right people at the table, making sure that you have the right voices there, acknowledging on the front end that there may be a need for a process to dissolve or resolve disputes that may arise, disagreements. We don't want to hit a stalemate in these instances. So kind of going ahead on the front end and establishing what that will look like. Talk about the length of the transition. This will be important when we think about what time of the school year is it? Is it what is an appropriate amount of time to allow for a seamless or smooth transition? And in my world, I'm thinking, this is something that's an adult issue. This is something that kids hopefully aren't feeling. And so how do we facilitate that in a way that is least disruptive? What are those milestones? Knowing that this is a complex situation and it's everything from people to materials to data to assessments, all of those pieces. How do we establish those appropriate milestones to drive a smooth transition? How are you going to meaningfully engage your communities, your families through this process? Not just at the beginning, but throughout, when we think about that this is really around supporting families and students transitioning. And it, of course, will include a factor around how the state will oversee and monitor the progress of this transition plan. Section 4, this to me felt important to kind of call out to say there are some standard terms that really aren't negotiable per se. For example, the first one is audit. If there was an audit finding, either a 133 audit, a compliance finding from a department monitoring, that's not something that we would just say, oh, well, that's their problem now. That it would not be something that would be transferable, for example. When we talk about budgets and we talk about remaining funds with carry forward, for example, we would make sure that's not a negotiable item. All of the funding, these funds were generated for these students, they will follow these students. And so there will be some very kind of standardized language built out in some of these areas that you see here. On the enrollment one, we definitely want to include some standard language to ensure equitable access to all students. And so making sure that any type of transition would take that into account, looking at where kids will be going to school once they return. Of course, student information systems, this is going to be critical for the home district when we think about how do you plan for the return if you don't know where kids are. Even more challenging in the current set of situations that we are in schools currently. But it is something that we have to ensure that we are transitioning that data in a way that protects personally identifiable information, but it still gives the home district the information they need for the student's return. Section 5 are those school-specific considerations. I will say, and I'm sure Terrence could underscore, this is the one piece we hear, like, this must be transparent. This has to be done with our communities, with our families. This is something, you know, I'd like to believe that we've learned lots of lessons in this past decade and that we are going to move forward in, you know, differently because of those. That includes what you see here, making sure that engagement plans are developed in a way that are really robust and meaningful. And it's not just, I'm going to send home. We actually had someone on our advisory group say, I had like a flyer sent home in a backpack. That doesn't seem the right level of engagement when you're talking about how this impacts children and their education. How do we address the personnel in the building? Not just teachers, of course, but what about the other staff at those buildings what is going to be the plan for the personnel in those buildings? Any other financial or operational components that would need special consideration would be spelled out in these school-specific sections of this. And so this is the piece that allows us to be able to meet the unique needs of an individual school. I will say that you know, we have schools that the data we do have looks very, very different. There are challenges in some schools with, of course, suspensions and expulsions. We have a school that has very high chronic absenteeism. And so when you're thinking about how do you develop a successful plan, those unique considerations have to be part of those discussions. So from the work of the past 3 months, I wanted to kind of put on one slide some of these emerging themes, and they've been directly stated. They have been included in some of the feedback we've gotten, and it really is about not forgetting about the families and communities that these schools belong to. And so making sure that that is authentic, and that word actually was the term that was used in this process. There's not a world where this happens from Nashville. And so how do we support this transition team to hold them accountable, hold ourselves accountable, but also think about how we do that first bullet in a meaningful way. Transparency, the biggest takeaway. This should be a very transparent process, not something that's done to us, something that's done with, that's developed and implemented alongside us for the best interest of kids. The third bullet, it was important that performance matters, that not every school is in the same place. Not every school should have exactly the same options based on a number of factors, but that performance matters, not just for ASD transition, but for what happens when that student returns to a home district. What are the zoned schools for where these students will return, trying to ensure that kids return and have a higher quality seat after the transition. And again, I've said the last one too many times, but it is certainly one that is trying to meet schools where they are, facilitate a transition that's meaningful and addresses those challenges so that we are successful in that transition. And now let's talk about the Charter Commission in this. Currently in legislation, you remain the appellate body for schools that would be transitioning out of the ASD. This is currently where we are. I can't look into the future. However, I know that there have been discussions about addressing that, and it actually was surfaced in the advisory group meeting, which is on the next slide. I want to share one of the and I was asked to call out this recommendation specifically. We had advisory group members who want an option for a direct application to the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission for certain schools, under certain conditions. Clearly, that would require legislative change. So that's not the world we're in today. Currently, the appellate authority is what we have. The things that that they also flagged was that conditions matter. And how do we protect and support schools that are performing well in some key areas? And those are the areas you see at the bottom of your slide. So clearly lots of important discussions that are taking place in all of this work as it relates to how we transition. On the last slide, I will say before I open up to questions, I want you all to know that this is not a world where this happens and 27 schools are coming at the same time. That's not anything that we can support. It's certainly not something that a district could support, or certainly would not ask that this organization support that either. So it will be a meaningful, thoughtful transition, and we will begin to have those discussions about what makes sense. We have schools that are getting close to that 10-year mark. And so we absolutely will be looking at lots of conditions. Again, none of us anticipated a pandemic where we would have no data, as well as a school year that has started basically virtually. So with those challenges in mind, but I want you all to know that this is not something that's going to happen all at one time. It would certainly be something that would be more of a slow kind of trickle versus a flood of schools coming and exiting all at the same time. And again, performance matters, individual school conditions matter, engaging and being committed to our community, and being accountable. You know, we inherit work and we meet it where it is and we move it forward. And part of that accountability is on the ASD to own where we are and the hard decisions that we need to make, and to also set up a structure that will allow us to move forward differently, so that the ASD is a meaningful intervention as part of a larger plan. But this is an important step that will be part of that, but clearly still working on getting that final draft after we go through lots of feedback sessions in November. But truly, just want to now open it to your questions, as I'm sure you have many. And as soon as we can, I will also make sure that we share the full draft with the commission, as just to make sure you all have a copy of it in your inboxes as soon as we get to that final draft.
Eve, thank you for the presentation. I want to ask two quick questions and then we'll open it up to the other commissioners. Talk to me about what a trickle is. You got 27 schools. Does the legislation talk about when you know what the period of time is to make a decision on these 27 schools? Is there anything else you can provide about the time frame around 27 schools?
I think that's a question we've asked a lot ourselves. I think part of the concern was that when this state Senate bill was passed, that 24-25 no earlier than the 24-25 school year was passed. That was a little bit concerning because of the point you just made. It's really challenging to be strategic and go slowly when you can't return any school until that time. And so I know that that's one of the areas that they will be, taking up in the next session, to facilitate the trickle of schools in a way that makes sense. So we have 27 schools, we have 4 direct run schools. And so when we think about transitioning those direct run schools, so that gets us a fewer number, what I would expect is that we will have schools that will apply to their home district probably in December of 22, if they make that adjustment in the legislation, that was passed. Otherwise, we're going to hit a different problem, and this is what I have flagged, is that we have schools that will meet that 10-year mark before the 24-25 school year. So something has to be done because we're now having kind of conflicting issues with legislation bumping it against each other. So I would expect that a trickle could be, I can't imagine there would be more than 4 to 5 per year. if we were trying to slow the release down. I will say that I'm strongly hopeful that we will have some clarity on some of those timelines in the months to come that will help that situation.
Thank you. My second question real quick. Hamilton County clearly went after this issue different. But when you look at these ASD schools, it seems, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, that there was almost like a small school system set up to manage them. Is that correct? Like there was a superintendent and all this. So there's an infrastructure that is there that has managed these. And is that an infrastructure that may be going forward? Is somebody looking at that's the best way, depending on how many schools end up under the jurisdiction, say, of a charter commission?
So you're correct, Tom, in that unlike the partnership network in Hamilton County, the Achievement School District is a district. There's a superintendent, there is a central office. Currently, the portfolio of schools is either there are 4 direct run schools on 3 campuses. The remainder of the schools are 11 charter operators operate those schools. What we know going forward is that as we address the current set of schools and we move forward with right sizing the ASD in future iterations, we are also adjusting the structure to make sure that that is still the right structure to manage schools. We expect that as we move into 24, 25, whenever the next priority list is run, that we expect that the ASD will look different. That's actually the work that we were trying to take on a year ago in our community meetings, trying to reset the ASD so that it is an intervention that is effective when district interventions have been unsuccessful. So there really is a reframing and a resetting of the ASD to come. The issue is that we have a current state that we have to address, and then we will have a future state that will look different. But to your question about the structure, I anticipate that we will continue to have some structures in place to support the schools in the ASD. It's likely when we stop direct running schools that there would be a smaller staff that would support, because that is the big lift.
Right. And Eve, to that point, will there be at least some information shared as to efficiency and effectiveness of the organizations that was put together to manage the schools, the district itself, just to sort of see what did we learn out of that? And because I'm assuming probably going forward, there, as you said, there's going to be something similar to that as we look down the road.
Yes, there will be. We continue to look at what is the right and appropriate structure to operate the Achievement School District. What I know is that when you're direct running schools, that is a heavy lift on a central office versus you have a portfolio of schools that are all charter. And right now the ASD has kind of a foot in each, and and so therefore our structure is such that that we will have to revisit it when we go forward, especially as we transition out of direct running schools into more of a different model that probably is a little more akin to the way in which the Charter Commission will operate schools.
Thank you. Let me open it up. Commissioners, questions for Dr. Carney.
This is Eddie Smith. Go ahead, Wendy.
Hi, Eve. I'll have questions. It's good to see you. Even if it's
good to see you.
So a couple questions. One is, I just want to make sure I understand process. So absent legislation that changes this, right now, if a school is exiting the ASD, they apply to their district says, no, thank you. We don't want you here, right? Like they deny them, and then they appeal to us. We follow our process that we have, and whether we have a new process for ASD schools, we don't right now. Right now we have a process that we follow that is a NACSA best practice. And then if we uphold the district, does the school just go away and those students are absorbed by district schools? Is that what happens?
Currently, that would be what happens, because that's just what the process that's currently in the law. I do think that having a transition plan that will address that will also be developed in a way, Wendy, that if we get to that place, we still have a plan for those students to transition. So in other words, we've engaged with the home district, with the data, with the benchmark assessments, with the staffing patterns, with all of those things about what instructional materials they're using. There will be some harder decisions around facilities because that would be a district decision. Are they going to stay in the same building? Are they going to merge them into other buildings? But even if it were to take the trajectory that you just walked through and that charter school no longer exists, we still have a plan in place to allow the return for students, even if their charter if you all uphold the district decision.
Okay, and so just sort of following through that rabbit, I just want to make sure I understand it. So ASD schools are zoned schools, right? And so for the most part, right?
Yes, for the most part.
Okay.
So what happened in Shelby County, for example, initially there was a school that was in the ASD didn't have a zoned Shelby County school. Since the ASD inception, there has been kind of an overlay so that every ASD school zone also has a Shelby zone associated with it. And so generally that is correct, yes.
So then those students would theoretically be absorbed by those zone schools. So the district essentially is, when they're making their decision, is saying either we're going to keep you school as school or we're going to have to absorb all these students, because it's the same district that's making that decision, right?
Yeah, it could be that it could be determined that based on enrollment patterns. We've seen different, declining enrollment in certain places. We also know that Shelby County is going through a Reimagine 901 where they're trying to be smarter about some of their facilities. It could be that they keep kids in that school. Those buildings belong to Shelby County schools, and I'm using Shelby because the majority of the schools are there. But those buildings belong to Shelby. They have put new roofs on some. There's been a new air conditioning, heating and air system put in another. So it could be a district decision that they're actually going to hold those students in that same school and bring other kids in. Those are the things that will be determined in those discussions. But the point of this transition plan is to force all the impacted groups to have those right discussions and for us to hold them accountable with milestones and keeping that transition on track to ensure that those things actually get discussed.
Oh, and that is my last question, was something you touched on, the buildings. So are all of the ASD schools buildings owned by the district? So that if the school the charter was revoked essentially or not renewed, depending on where and then the commission upheld that, then that building just goes back to the district.
That's correct.
Which feels a little bit like an incentive for the district to see a charter school, right? I mean, we get our building back, we get our own people in.
If you think about some of the ASD charter schools that are doing quite well, you might want, there is also an incentive to allow, because ultimately, right now the accountability for those schools live with the ASD. You have a higher performing school that's showing tremendous TVOS growth, for example. It might be in the district's best interest to allow that to continue. And it could very well be that they, with everything else that schools are facing right now in this environment, it may be that they would accept that, approve that charter and allow that school to continue to exist as it currently does.
But then those good scores and those high TVOS scores count for the district. They should count for the ASD, right? So it sounds like a disincentive.
Once they transition back,
doing
they
well.
will count for the district, right? Once they transition back, they would be district reflected.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. I know this is a complicated thing, so I appreciate you.
Yes, no problem.
And good morning, Eve. This is Eddie Smith. I want to follow up with two things on the discussion you were having with Wendy just now. One, looking at the ASD, you all run the report every 3 years. Well, we did not have the TN Ready test last year. We hope to hold it this year, but it's going to be a hold harmless year for everyone. So is it going to be, are you all looking at where if it helps the school, they can use it, and if it hurts them, they obviously can deny it? Because that will go into the process of what we would have to look at, because there's going to be a 2-year gap of data that we aren't able to use when we're evaluating anyone who appeals to us. So kind of talk about just what you kind of foresee. I know I'm asking you to look into the Eve Carney crystal ball a little bit, but that's just one of the concerns that I have, because, you know, there were some schools that I know were on the cusp of leaving. We've got all this pandemic and a huge gap. Is anyone looking at like the state mandated, like Ames Web or anything that are administered, to see what kind of slide did we have from where the kids were at December of last year to the beginning of this school year in the ASD schools, kind of using that as a metric to see how things are affecting the kids in the pandemic?
All very good points and questions, Commissioner Smith. I would say this, first of all, you know, we'll have to wait to see the language that the legislature chooses to use here. If, you know, the governor has voiced, has made a position statement on this, it would require legislative action. The interesting part of this is that there are state requirements for assessment. There are also federal requirements for assessment. So trying to kind of navigate that kind of muddy water of how do you meet the federal requirements that's tied to hundreds of millions of education dollars for Tennessee students. And I'm thinking back to 17-18 when we had the testing issues, and the terminology that was used in that legislation was no adverse action. Whether or not they take an approach like that, or to your point, if it helps you, potentially you could use it, but it can't hurt you, kind of that whole harmless notion. We will have to just wait and see. You're correct. We had a school that had tremendous growth that missed exit by 0.2%. And it was impressive. It was a 1-year success rate that almost had their exit. So I think there's a world where if a school could earn exit, it could, but again, we will have to hold and see how the legislature mandates this this current school year assessment season. We absolutely are looking at lots of data to try to figure out the learning loss, how to recoup learning minutes, and how to begin to catch kids up, because it's not just about resuming. You've got to make up some ground. And so how do you do that? I know that ASD schools took advantage of, most of them did. I can't say 100% of them did, but I know the direct runs did, and many of the others did as well. That beginning of year checkpoint assessment that the department made available for free to try to get a sense of where kids are so that they can begin to address those losses. I think absolutely as we move closer to, many schools have been back in person. I know Hamilton County has been back full in person. Davidson is beginning to bring kids back. Shelby is not in that space currently. And so getting to kind of that mid-year point will be an important kind of, to me, moment where some of those benchmarks could be helpful in determining that year-to-year growth. But that will be, we look at data all of the time, and I know all of the districts do as it relates to their priority schools. They report monthly data to the department. It's just unprecedented, and it's challenging to think about, and it weighs very heavily on me to think about making those kinds of high risk and high profile designations based on conditions that are outside of all of our control.
Well, and one of the things that I also want to make sure that, because I know with districts, especially as they start looking at, when schools could be coming out of the ASD and determining whether or not they're going to accept them, we need to also make sure that districts aren't looking at this, these 2 years of data plus that 17-18 as any metric to evaluate whether that charter school or that operator of the ASD school was meeting all the metrics. Because if they use that and it negatively impacts, that's something that's going to have to go into our thought process as well. My third question, on the facilities. I know the legislature has put quite a bit of money into the budget for charter operators to use for facility improvements. Have any of the district-owned buildings used those funds to improve the building for the purpose of a charter school when the district itself wasn't, that they could then go back and take the school from that charter school if they denied the application.
I will say, I'll just tell you what I know here. I know that when we had the charter school facilities grant that was awarded to charter schools, clearly that's for the, improvements on the facility while the charter school was using it. At the end of the day, I can see that the home district would benefit from that if down the road they revoke or they do not approve the charter and it goes back to the district. But I don't know any way around that because charters currently, they do not own the buildings that they are in.
And then I guess just a thought process is if, let's say a school has 2 years left in their 10-year and looking at that time frame, making sure that if let's just pick, Alphabet County, because I don't want to pick on any one county, says, hey, we want to draw down $250,000 to improve this school. But internally, they know they're not going to approve it to kick them out, but they got free money from the state to improve a school. That's just one of those things that I probably think that the state ought to be looking at just to make sure that it's going for the intended purpose, which is to help improve the school that a charter operator is in to benefit the kids that are being served by that charter operator.
Yeah, understood. And I would say that, as we, when I think back to early 2020, when we had our budget that the governor had proposed for education, and it got cut pretty dramatically due to the revenues coming into the state, et cetera, the charter school facilities was part of what was cut. So just to be clear, like there wasn't the state investment that we've seen in years past because of the pandemic. That's not to say that there's not support for charter schools, because there absolutely is. It's just the necessity to do so. All programs were cut, including that facilities grant. But I think your point is very valid as we think about we move into another cycle of a budget cycle, and hopefully our economy is recovering and there is money available. I think that's a very valid point to say we need to be thoughtful about how those funds are, the intent of those funds to benefit kids sitting in charter schools at that time and the buildings that they're in, and then how do you kind of reconcile the fact that at some point their ASD is not a forever home, and that's kind of a term it wasn't never intended to be. So at some point they will exit, and so what happens then?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on that one more? I'm sorry, Tom, just on the facilities question, because this is where I'm hitting a dead end. So back to this process. District denies or returning to the district. They appeal to the commission. We overturn the district and become their authorizer and their district, right? What happens to that building now? Because that building belongs to the county. Is that something that is is there a legislative fix being looked at? Is that something that would be, I don't know, where does that decision happen? Because I don't want the charter commission. We just went over our budget. We approve a school because we feel like they're serving kids well, and then suddenly we have an $80,000 hit to pay Shelby County for a building. So I'm just curious if that's been thought through.
It absolutely has been thought through, and there have been I know I have been part of some of those drafts and some of those discussions to say, what does it look like to transition a school to the charter commission, and what happens? I mean, that has been the exact conversation is around facilities, and is there legislation that is needed to protect or at least to create a longer runway to say you're treated like you get to kind of hold constant those conditions for a period of time to allow the charter to begin to find partners to help purchase a building, so that forever and ever you're not beholden to a building you don't own. And so that, to Commissioner Smith's point, like you're investing in a building that you ultimately will have the long-term benefit of those improvements. Those are the things we've been discussing as, a runway or an on-ramp, if you will, and how long that on-ramp needs to be to allow a seamless transition in a way that's also manageable for that operator to secure a building. And I know those are the types of conversations we're continuing to have. It's a strange time. We're sitting here almost in November, and we are having these ongoing conversations. I think it will be a very big part of what we talk about in the months to come as the legislature comes back.
And Eve, sorry, one more thought on that. Just something to think about is, as you move forward, hoping, all of us are hoping that the economy has recovered and that we have the extra funds for the charter schools. Maybe look at, from this point forward, that any district that draws those funds down to use on a building, that the charter school would have first right of refusal if they do not receive that charter school back into the district for use of that building moving forward.
That's a good recommendation. And I've actually, we've talked through a couple of different scenarios like that, exactly that. The runway I just mentioned, some kind of reduced rate for a long-term lease at a reduced rate, especially when we talk about, we know districts are looking at enrollment and trying to be smarter about the buildings that they're occupying. And so it could be that they are trying to sell some buildings. I know that has actually happened in, I believe in one that I can for sure call. But so when we think about what this pandemic is going to mean for districts and how they structure going forward with more kids in virtual, with more kids, fewer kids in buildings. So it's going to be an interesting period in time, no question.
Mr. Richards, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. And what troubles me is, as you look at this, to be certain that you look at what's going to be the hardest situation, and that is a situation where a school came into the ASD because of terrible performance with its local school district. It has now been in the ASD. It goes through this process. Perhaps they don't meet the criteria for the charter to continue, so they aren't accepted as a charter by their returning district, and we don't overturn that. As I understand it, in that case, the school goes back to the district, which is where the original failure occurred. And what I would be troubled by is if after a year or two after that, that school then gets sent back to the ASD and we start over again with a charter situation, and we have yet to do anything to help those kids in that failing school. So as you play this out, please be sure to look at this process from the point of view of how we're going to prevent that from happening, because I don't think anyone who's talking about the ASD not being a permanent home is looking for some way to avoid having to actually deal with these schools that haven't served the best needs of their kids. And out of this 27, I'm sure there are some in that category. So I just urge you, as you think through this with your commission, I know Terrence is on it, so he's hearing these comments, that what I don't want to see is kids going back, they're in their local district for 2 years, and then they're back, they go to the ASD because they're not performing. So please consider that.
Absolutely. Comments heard, and certainly I feel like this occupies so much of my thinking all of the time. I can assure you that I think a lot about kids in those buildings and the impact all of this has on them. When I feel like, we know that schools that are in the ASD, it wasn't, they came from schools that were underperforming. And so part of what we have also been negotiating is trying to think about how we address ensuring a higher quality seat upon the return. But to your second part of that point of, you don't want this kind of pendulum to then say a couple of years later they're back. Clearly that would be something that we would plan for and try to intervene differently, because that's not what I want. I don't think that's at all what the commissioner or anyone else wants. I think we're trying to structure it differently and also approach a school that's coming, say, for the first time on the list. How do we intervene differently at that stage? My hope is that that once we have, we move through this transition time, that we will have a structure in place that most of our schools, the ASD should probably be no more than 15 schools, 15 to 20 not 30, because if you focus on everything, you can focus on nothing. And so how do you figure out the schools that need that level of intervention after you've done everything you can do to support the district to be successful? There's probably not a day that I don't have the same thoughts you just expressed. So please know that I appreciate them, and they're definitely part of what I wrestle with regularly.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Patterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Terrence Patterson. I guess one kind of comment, and then Eve, maybe a framing to get your thoughts. We did have very rich conversation in the advisor group. So I just wanted to assure the commission that big topics that came up from my perspective were around accountability, and then also around community engagement. And then lastly, how or what might the transition look like for our body? So certainly we were thought of in the context. And so just wanted to say thank you, Eve, for leading that work and engaging a wide variety of characters and community members, because it was quite a challenge. So I wanted to say hats off. And then I guess my framing, Eve, because there's a lot of stuff at play. And so I think I'm trying to frame maybe 3 big points, and tell me if this is close. Maybe point 1 is the state is finalizing the transition terms and is working with local districts and will likely engage us in terms of what transition looks like. 2, we can expect 4 to 5 schools per year coming to us in this transition period. And then 3, we may, or we should expect the potential for direct application to our body based on current conditions. Are those kind of fair statements? And is there maybe a 4th or a 5th? Are those kind of the 3 big takeaways?
So I think I'm really appreciative actually of your first point of like the comment around accountability, and that's accountability for all groups that are involved here. Clearly the ASD, we will hold ourselves accountable for what did and did not happen in this 10 years and own that. That was another big point of the group, was kind of owning what didn't work. And so I appreciate you flagging that. But in terms of your buckets, I think absolutely finalizing transition terms, but also process for that. And then of course, we will engage you all once those are finalized. The 4 to 5 per year was, I'll just be honest, that's my best guess at this point. It will be contingent upon what happens in this next session with that 24-25 language, with any other legislation that gets passed around a direct application or direct potential for that, should that become available. Because what you might have at that point would be things, you might have certain schools that are more interested in moving ahead. But I think part of our work will be to manage that, because at the end of this, like, in the same spirit of, we can't manage transitioning that many schools at one time. We would certainly not expect that would make sense for this commission or to any district to do it well and to do it thoughtfully. And so that's my best guess. That's my caveat on 4 to 5. That's my best guess right now, knowing that not every school will have the same options available to them based on lots of things, right? There could be performance. The performance part is even more challenging right now. But as we think about different ways to measure how kids are progressing, those will be the ongoing discussions. But no, I think your buckets are right. And I think the next 60 days, when we get additional feedback from those virtual town halls in November, will really be parent facing, because I feel like that's a stakeholder group that is most critical, that we want to be really clear that we want them to hear how this impacts their child. And I think a lot of the discussions here and with other groups, it's been about the policy. It's been about the process that an organization, the ASD, the Davidson County, Shelby County takes. But what does this mean for my child? And really trying to engage parents in that space in November. So I'm interested to hear additional feedback from there, but lots of big work to happen in the next 60 days.
Other questions? Well, Eve, again, thank you for this update. You can tell from the feedback that there's a lot of interest from the commissioners. And I would just ask you, working with Tess, to please come back as you are finalizing this at the end of the next 60 days. So we have an update and we know sort of exactly what you are planning to take forward, particularly the legislature. And, you know, you're welcome back anytime, but definitely would like to have you back when you get to that point.
Well, let me just say, I feel like I went over my time, but thank you all for this time and for this opportunity. I would also just say to all of you, as you kind of see the full draft, as you process all of this in your future conversations, everyone on here, I think, knows how to get in touch with me. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly for a conversation, for feedback. I welcome that. I think we are all in this for kids and for what's best. And so you all play a critical part in that. So I would welcome that feedback today, later, or even as we approach the end of this calendar year.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your meeting.
So now let's move to the executive director's update. Tess has been in this role for a month. Probably for her, it seems like longer, but she made a lot of progress. So I would like to ask her to give us an operational update on things that are going on, and particularly as she's looking ahead for on the horizon, what she sees for the commission. Tess?
Thank you so much. And in your packet of materials, I provided a written report to you all that goes into far more depth than I'll give today. But I did want to highlight some things that I think are important for you all to know, and also just to highlight some of the challenges that I've seen as we are getting up and running. So commission staffing, as we talked about from a budgetary perspective, staffing is underway. So from a first, as we discussed through the hiring process, the hiring of the general counsel has been my primary focus. I have been working through phone interviews via video call, a performance task for those candidates. I'm going to be conducting final round interviews with candidates next week. And I've also offered to those candidates to do that in person in a socially distanced, safe manner, recognizing that, as you all know, hiring in a remote fashion is difficult. And I want to make sure that those individuals have an opportunity to connect with me directly, as well as for me to connect with them directly as well. So I do anticipate that I will be making a decision on the general counsel within the next 2 weeks, and will notify you all when an offer has been accepted. Similarly, moving forward on the Director of External Affairs, this person is going to be our legislative liaison, as well as the communications point of contact. That job description has been officially approved for publishing on the DOHR website. And I will notify commissioners when a candidate has been selected. I am looking to move pretty quickly on that role given the upcoming legislative session. So would love to be having that individual accepting and coming on board by early December if possible. Other staffing, as I mentioned when we talked about the org chart, I've requested permission to fill a special assistant position to work with me on policy and strategy. And I've also requested to fill a position on Director of Finance and Operations. I think the biggest challenge that I am currently facing is that the state is in a statewide hiring freeze. So for each position that I am looking to fill, I have to file and receive approval on a freeze hiring waiver. The freeze hiring waiver process can very easily take 2 to 3 to 4 weeks to hear back. because certainly understanding that from a state perspective, although we are certainly authorized to fill those positions from a legislative perspective, they want to ensure that we're doing so in a thoughtful around our budget. So I do think that is a challenge and something that we're going to have to continue to work through, is that we are a startup entity, we are hiring and purchasing a lot of equipment right now, but also trying to navigate the state processes as it relates to purchasing freezes and hiring freezes. So looking ahead, there's a number of things upcoming as it relates to the General Assembly that I did want to flag for the full commission. So the commission has its first sunset hearing set for November the 17th. That is in front of a subcommittee at the Joint Government Operations Committee. The commission chair, Tom Griscom, and I will be testifying on behalf of the Charter Commission. We are submitting materials to the subcommittee next week with regard to questions that we needed to prepare responses for. I'm going to be beginning my outreach to the members of that subcommittee in the next week to offer to come in and meet with them prior to the hearing. And certainly we'll report back to the full commission on the outcome of that sunset hearing after the hearing on the 17th. We also anticipate that we will have a government operations rule review coming up soon regarding the charter school appeal rules that the commission has previously passed and are now in the rule promulgation process. We haven't been notified of that date yet, but we'll certainly keep you all up to date on when that is. We are going to be looking towards preparation for renewal appeals. So this is the first set of appeals that the commission might be receiving. From a timeline perspective, the local districts have to vote on renewal applications no later than February 1st of 2021. I anticipate that most districts will vote sometime in January on those applications, and both Shelby County and Metro Nashville Public Schools are considering renewal applications this cycle. So that means that the commission may be receiving any appeals for renewal sometime in mid-February, and we would be looking to handle renewal appeals in April of 2021 at our April regular meeting. So at our December meeting, in a few short weeks, we will be talking through in much more greater detail the renewal appeal process. And we will take time as a commission to walk through a previous appeal heard by the state board. So you all will be receiving from me a sample packet of materials. You will be receiving the recommendation that the State Board of Education received on that appeal. And we are going to be presenting it as if you are hearing that appeal. So you can get a sense of the information that you would receive on the record, how that you should be thinking about considering appeals, what questions you might want to know, what additional information you might receive in appeal, so that we can all be ready for those first appeal cycle in the spring. From a communication standpoint, we are moving forward. I'm excited to say that we are building out the website. We are hoping to have that launched in the next week or two, so that we will have a commission website that is no longer a subsite of the Department of Education, but is an official standalone Charter Commission website. It will be in the same branding and kind of platform as all other Tennessee.gov websites, but really excited to be able to share that with you all. And as I shared the logo, a draft logo was sent to you all last week. Please let me know if you have any concerns with it by the end of the week Friday. I appreciate those of you who've reached out thus far. And thus far, we've gotten a really great response. So I'm really excited about that. Once we get a logo in place, we'll start moving forward on some basic branding, a PowerPoint template, a one-pager, just so that we can really be thoughtful about how do we be consistent across what we're producing from a written perspective. And then looking forward into priorities for 2021, I think the focus will be, as I talked about on the staffing perspectives, is really making sure our LEA functions are set and ready to go. So Chanel and I are going to be working over the next couple of months to ensure that the LEA policies and procedures are established and presented to you all. I did share a fair warning with the Rules and Policies Committee that there are a lot of LEA policies and procedures, so don't be alarmed. I promise we will get through it together. But I think it's a good reminder that we act as an LEA, and we have to have the policies and procedures that any other school district, that if you go on their website and you see the numerous policies they have, we need to have them as well. And so we'll be working to get those established with the commission. We are also going to be working to set up the LEA functions, as I was saying, particularly on federal programs, special populations, and student information systems. So regularly meeting with the state board to facilitate that transfer. We're beginning to meet with the authorized charter schools that are going to be transferring over to make sure that process is seamless. And in terms of authorized charter schools coming under the commission, I did want to give you all an update. The state board voted to approve 4 charter schools at its September special called meeting. 3 of the 4 schools will be under the charter commission. There was 1 school that came into agreement with Shelby County, and that school will be authorized by Shelby County. So neither the state board nor the commission will have any responsibilities for that school. So if we're looking at what current status is now for commission authorized schools, both next year and moving forward, we will have our 3 operating charter schools, which are currently in operation, which is Bluff City High School in Memphis, KIPP Antioch College Prep, and KIPP Antioch College Prep Middle in Nashville. We have 2 additional schools that are projected to open in 2021-22, so next school year, and that's Cornerstone Prep and Nashville Collegiate Prep. And then we have 2 additional schools that will be opening in future school years. Rocketship Nashville number 3 will be opening, and then KIPP Antioch College Prep High School is slated to open in 23-24. So beginning in the spring, one of the tasks of the staff will be to work on the pre-opening process with any of the schools that are slated to open in 21-22. And I am happy to take any questions at this time, both on the updates that I provided right now or anything that I provided in the report, or any questions that folks may have.
Questions. So let me just say that's a month's worth of work. So I think we got a pretty good idea of the executive director that we have. Tess and I have a call every week, and I know out of that she shares back with commissioners the points and things that we've talked about, which I really appreciate that transparency and continued outreach to the commission.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Hey, this is Alan Levine.
Yes.
First of all, I want to say to Tess, I appreciate the outreach to us individually in terms of the call that we had last week. That was really great to have that direct connection to you. I meant to ask you when we spoke, and you may have said something about it earlier and I missed it, but is there any thought to getting us a portal, some type like a Board Effect or Board Vantage or something, so that all of our board packet and information and stuff can be done through an electronic portal?
Absolutely. I appreciate you bringing up that point. That is something that Tom and I have discussed on our weekly check-ins. The state does provide a SharePoint, which is free for us to use. I'm sure that Commissioner Tucker can share that it's a love-hate relationship with SharePoint, but I do think that is how at least the State Board of Education gets its packet of information. I think to your point, I would like to transition us away from sending things via email, particularly when we are thinking about the amount of materials that you are going to be receiving in an appeal. Right. We're just going to have to move to an online platform exactly as you're talking about. Okay. So I think you and I are on the same page. We'll be rolling that out. I think if we can do it for the December meeting, that would be great. If not, we will absolutely be doing that for the February meeting.
Thanks, Tess.
Other questions? Seeing none, the final part of our agenda is public comment. In accordance with Commission Policy 1.200, we've reserved time for up to 30 minutes of public comment. Judy, can you please introduce any individuals who have registered for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, we had no reservations for public comment for this meeting.
Thank you. So before we finish, I'm going to put a topic out for commissioners to be thinking about prior to our December meeting. But before I do, this may be the last time as a commission that Chanel Tyler is going to be in the capacity as our interim general counsel. And I just want to recognize and thank Chanel for stepping in, helping us. You've watched us as we have sort of had some growing pains, and now we're getting to the point where it looks like we've got a pretty good idea of where we're heading. We've got leadership. So Chanel, thank you for all you've done. You really have made us successful, allowed us to get to where we are today, and really appreciate your work. And maybe we'll find a better way to thank you, but I did not want this meeting to end without saying that, because we probably will have a new general counsel, as Tess said, when we meet in December. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. It's definitely been a pleasure to work with you.
So before we adjourn, I want to preview a discussion I'd like for the commission to have in December, as I said. As we wrap up this first year of the commission, we look into 2021, where we assume responsibilities from the state board. I think it's time for us to step back and look at the committee structure to make sure that we have the right committee set up to do the best work. In particular, I think you all know I feel strongly about having a governance function. And while Alan and Chris have been part of this, we haven't met yet because we really haven't been to the point to need to meet. But as we have put the policies and procedures in place, a possibility might be is to put the governance function also within the rules and regulations committee. I'd like you to think about that. And secondly, I think we need to, similar to the state board, set up a new committee that really looks at what I'll, for lack of a better term right now, the schools that we have and the schools that we're going to continue to have, so that we are looking at that academic, that performance, that school's role that we have to perform to make sure that we are attuned to that. And so I don't know the name of it. I'll be looking for that, for those suggestions. But I know the state board has committees that focus on this. So I'd like for us to be, at least be thinking about and prepared to discuss in December a brand new committee that really does focus more on the schools and that educational function. And Tess and I have talked about this. She will be reaching out to talk about interest on this new committee. And Terrence, I hope you don't have a big hiccup, but I think putting governance in with what you all are doing makes some sense. So I just wanted to tee that up for you all to be thinking about. If you have any things you want to share before our December meeting, they're more than welcome. But I really would like to have time set aside to look at that committee structure and look at it in terms of going forward now as we get ready to become much more operational. So I want to thank everybody for your attendance today, for your participation. And let me open it up if there are any final comments from commissioners before I entertain a motion to adjourn. Well, seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mrs. Eddy, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do I have a second?
Terrence Patterson, second.
Thank you, Terrence. Any other discussion? Judy, this is the last roll call of the day, please.
Okay. Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Sisnet.
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Chairman Griscom.
Aye.
8 of 8. We are adjourned.
Thank you. See you all on December 16th. Have a great rest of the
Thank you,
week.
everyone. Bye.